I want to go over a couple of things that we talked about last time before we move on to the next chapter. And it was about the difference between a change in quantity and a change in demand, or a change in supply itself, okay? That, remember, when we had price and quantity demanded, okay? As price increased, quantity demanded decreased, right? We had this downward sloping demand curve that shows an inverse relationship between price and quantity, okay? That when price was here, we wanted that quantity. But if price moved up to here, then we'll take less, okay? We're going to move from one point on this curve to the other. That's a change in quantity demanded. We are moving up and down this column here. But if something causes us to prefer this good, I'll just move it over here. Okay? Oops, put it back in there. Okay? To prefer this good more than we did in the past. Okay? So at a price of $1, we would want 5 instead of 4. And at a price of 2, we would want 4 instead of 3. And at a price of 3 instead of 2, and so forth, okay? And what has happened is the demand curve has shifted out to the right, okay? That's an increase in demand, a change in demand itself. We're moving from this column to that column, okay? So I'm going to redraw this, but this time I'm going to put, I'll get rid of this, we don't need this. I'm going to put the supply curve in also, okay? So we have a supply curve and a demand curve. Now let's say this good becomes more popular, okay? At every possible price, we would buy more of it because it makes us live longer or happier or whatever, okay? So at every possible price, we would buy more. That would cause an increase in demand, right? At every possible price, we're in this other column over here, okay? So we move from this position to that. Equilibrium used to be here, and now it's here. We have moved along the supply curve, okay? When the entire demand curve shifted out, we moved from one point on the supply curve to the other. Morning. Okay. So this is an increase in demand. In terms of supply, how would we describe this? Is this an increase in supply or an increase in quantity supplied? Quantity, okay? So that a change in demand leads to a change in quantity supplied, okay? That's why we get a change in quantity supplied. When the demand curve shifts, it causes a change in price, which results in either an increase or decrease in quantity supplied. The whole demand curve is shifting out, but nothing has changed in terms of supply, in terms of the non-price factors, so the supply curve isn't going to shift. So when the demand curve shifts out, we move from one point on the supply curve to the other. So we have here what's called an increase in demand, okay? But in terms of supply, we have an increase in quantity supplied. Okay, you all right with that? All right. So when the whole curve shifts, change in demand or change in supply. But when only one curve shifts, the other curve is going to see a change in quantity. Okay, let's look at the change in supply and why it causes a change in quantity demanded. Okay. Supply curve, demand curve. Now, the cost of producing this good goes down. There's a technological advance, all right? We know that as costs drop at every possible price, this is now demand, okay? At every possible price, there was an increase in profit, so at every possible price, more will be produced. So if costs fall, the supply curve will shift out to the right. There'll be an increase in supply. What does that do? That causes the price of the good to go down. And because the price of the good went down, we move from this point on the demand curve to that point. That's an increase in quantity demanded, okay? So an increase, all right, over here, an increase in supply, the whole supply curve shifting out, okay, will lead to an increase in quantity demanded. Okay, you all right for that? So a change in the position of the supply curve will move us to a different position on the demand curve. As price goes down, quantity demanded increases, or if the supply curve shifted in and we move from that point back to that point, that would be a decrease in quantity demanded. Okay? All right with that, everybody? Hope so. Oops, I don't have to do that. Go to the next one. All right. Now let's see. Remember that we have what's called a price system, okay? Oh, my mouth's so dry. A price system is a system in which supply and demand are constantly changing, and as a result, changed quantity demanded and supplied, okay? Well, I didn't say that very well. Price system is a system in which prices are constantly changing in response to changes in supply and demand, okay? Now, prices do two things. They allocate resources, okay? They determine how much gets produced, and they send signals to us as consumers as to what is relatively abundant and what is relatively scarce. As a good becomes harder and harder to find, more and more rare, okay? Harder and harder to get, what's going to happen to its price? It will go up, exactly right. As a good becomes relatively more and more abundant, there's more and more of them out there, what do you think happens to price? It comes down, okay? So the price system sends us signals that these goods are becoming more scarce because the price is going up. That tells you these are becoming harder to find. But goods that have low prices, we can tell that they are abundant, they are everywhere. And as price falls, we know they're becoming easier to get, okay? So prices send us signals as to what is becoming more scarce or more abundant. But they also act as a rationing device to ensure that we produce the exact right amount, okay? It's a wonderful system for allocating resources to their best uses. Let's say that widgets become more popular, okay? We like right now, question? No, okay. Right now, remember that equilibrium occurs in the market where the supply and demand curves cross. When price is above this, when price is above equilibrium, we get surpluses, okay? At that high price, we only want that amount, but at that high price, they want to give us that amount. So that's the quantity demanded, and that's the quantity supplied. So we end up with a surplus, okay? And what will that do to prices? It will cause price to fall till we get down here to equilibrium and eliminate that surplus. When price is below, just the opposite, right? That's how many they want to give us because they're not making much money, but because they're cheap, that's how much we want. Now we end up with a shortage. Okay? And what will happen now? Price will rise to equilibrium as those consumers who place a higher value on that current price bid up the price to try to get one. Okay? So what happens? Once we reach equilibrium, do that all the time, we are producing the exact right amount. At that price, the amount we want is equal to the amount that they're giving us. There's no overproduction, no surplus, and no shortage, no underproduction. We are producing the exact right amount that people want, okay? Not too much, not too little. We're devoting the right number of resources. Now, as this good becomes more popular, we want more of it. We send signals to the producers. Give us more of these. Use more resources to produce this good. As this good becomes more popular, demand for that good increases. The price of that good in the marketplace rises, and as price rises, we get an increase in the quantity supplied. We go from this quantity now to that quantity, okay? More resources will be used to produce this good. We've sent a signal. We want more of these. For those things that we no longer desire to have, like slide rules, right, that I talked about last time, demand for these goods decreases. Okay? Price for these goods falls. Profits on these goods decrease. And the quantity manufacturers produce now falls. We use fewer resources for producing these goods. We've sent a signal. Don't waste our resources making these. We don't want these anymore. And we send that signal by dropping the price. And if the price falls below what it costs to make this good, how many do we get? None. We don't waste any money making slide rules today, okay? Because nobody's willing to pay more for that than it would cost to make it, all right? So we have an excellent system for allocating resources, for saying use more resources to produce these goods and don't use as many resources to produce those goods. Prices of goods that we no longer desire to have fall, we don't get any more of them. Prices of goods that we want more of rise, we get more of them. All right? Okay. So we have a price system, which is very efficient mostly for allocating resources. Okay. This is, that's chapter, well, all right. Now, we live in a system of markets, okay, where the prices of goods are set by the forces of supply and demand, okay, and we engage in transactions, voluntary exchanges. Why? Because we believe as a result of these exchanges, we will be better off. When I go buy a car from the automobile dealer, right, I'm better off because I have a new car. The automobile is happier, dealer is happier because now they have my money. All right? Okay? I hate buying cars, but actually I love buying cars. I hate the process though, right? What's it going to take to get you in the car today, Mr. Sheehan? I've probably been through that, okay? Now, when you engage in a transaction, there are costs involved. You don't just say, I think I'll buy a car today, so you go down, there's a dealer right around the corner, I'll go down there and buy a car. And you walk in and you say, yeah, I'll take that car, right? Doesn't happen like that, does it? No. You gotta do some research first, right? You go to the dealers, the cars that you're interested in, you go online, check out what they're selling for there, right? You may even go down and negotiate a better price with them or try to negotiate with them, right? And then once you buy the car, you take it home and you make your first 3 months payments, and then you lose your job and you stop paying for your car, and then what's going to happen? Yeah, there's going to be repossessed, right? The repo man's going to come in the middle of the night and wire your car, and off it goes, okay? These are all transaction costs, okay? They are costs associated with the exchange process. And depending upon what you buy, of course, transaction costs can be very small. I'm going into the 7-Eleven to buy a tube of toothpaste, right? I'm not going to spend much time searching. I'm just going to see if they have the brand I like, and I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to leave. Or to a yacht, right, or a piece of property where you sit down and you negotiate. It might take quite some time as you do a lot of searching, you do a lot of talking, a lot of negotiating, right? And once the deal is done, enforcing that deal, enforcing that contract is also a transaction cost associated with the seller themselves, right? That if you don't live up to your contract, they have to sue you or hire somebody to steal the car back and that type of thing. These are all transaction costs that we bear and that sellers bear. Middlemen, you've heard the saying, let's cut out the middleman. Sure, great idea. That will reduce your costs, usually, sorry, I shouldn't say usually, depending upon the situation, right? If you had to buy all of your things directly from a producer, how much time would it take you to do that, and how much would it cost you? If you had to go and buy your own eggs from the egg farm or whatever, chicken farm, right? You had to go to a butcher to get your meat. You had to go to a bakery to get your bread. You had to go to a dairy to get your milk. All of these things would cost you a lot of time and money. But we have a middleman that specializes in reducing this cost, right? It's called a supermarket, right? So that you can go to the supermarket and you can pick everything you want without having to go all over town. And not only that, let's say you're going to buy some cereal, right? You don't have to go to each individual cereal manufacturer and find out what they're selling and how much for and then to compare them. It's all right there in front of you, right there at the supermarket. Okay? We like to cut out the middlemen, but for the most part, the middleman is there to reduce the cost of engaging in transactions. That's why we have them. Otherwise, it would take you days and tremendous amounts of time and energy and money to buy all the things that you need if we did not have middlemen like supermarkets, okay? So middlemen are specialists in reducing transaction costs. The costs of gathering information on alternative purchases, negotiating the deal, and then enforcing it once the deal has been done, all right? Transaction costs, okay. All right, let's see. We talked about when you should be able to figure this out pretty quickly, okay, from now on, that if there's a change in one of these ceteris paribus conditions, remember, non-price conditions, that cause us to buy more or less at every price, or for the seller to offer more or less at every price, right? Remember that the curves shift because of changes in non-price factors. The good becomes more popular. A change in price of a substitute, or in terms of supply, costs go down or costs go up, all right? All of these things cause these curves to shift. And when one curve shifts, you should be able to figure out what's going to happen to price, equilibrium price, and quantity, right? If the cost of producing this good decreases, what's going to happen to equilibrium price and quantity? Say what? It'll move up or down. If the cost of producing whatever this good is, okay, good, whatever it is, if the cost of producing this goes down, what's going to happen to the supply curve? It will shift out. And as the supply curve shifts out, what happens to quantity and price? Price falls, and quantity will increase, okay? If the government raises taxes on producers of this good, what will happen? Just the opposite. Increases in taxes reduce profits. Less will be offered at every price. The supply curve will shift in. Equilibrium price will rise, and equilibrium quantity will fall. Okay? So when one curve is shifting, it should be fairly easy for you to figure out what's going to happen. This good becomes less popular. We find out that if you have it and everybody knows it, you're a loser. Okay? We don't want to be losers. So what's going to happen to the demand curve if we find out if this good becomes less popular? Shift in, right? So the demand curve shifts in, and what happens to price? It falls, and quantity decreases, okay? So this type of thing you should be getting fairly familiar with what's going to happen when there's a change in one of these ceteris paribus conditions. For demand, remember, it's incomes, populations, tastes and preferences, prices of related goods, substitutes, and complements, and expectations about the future, okay? For supply, right, it's costs, meaning costs of the inputs, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, costs of taxes, technology, which only reduces costs, and expectations about the future price, right? They think the price is going to go up tomorrow. They cut back today. And what was the other one? Population, number of manufacturers. All of those things will shift these curves. And if only one thing is happening, like only demand is shifting or only supply is shifting, you should be able to figure out what's going to happen to price and quantity, all right? But things don't happen where one thing is shifting and the other one isn't. We're almost always seeing changes in both sides, both demand and supply, okay? So both curves might shift. If both curves are shifting in the same direction, they're both moving out, okay? All these curves are moving in this direction, then if both supply and demand are increasing, price has got to be going up, okay? But what happens, quantity has to be going up. Sorry about that, okay? But what about price? Don't know. We started here, both curves shifted out, price went up, both curves shifted out again, price went down, okay? All right with that? When both curves are shifting in the same direction, in or out, we should be able to figure out what's going to happen to quantity. We want more, they're giving us more, quantity's got to be going up. But whether price goes up or down or remains the same depends on which shifts more. We want a lot more, and they only give us a few more. Shortage, price is going up. We want a few more, but they give us a lot more. Surplus, price will go down, okay? Unless you know which one is shifting more than the other, you don't know what's going to happen to price. It is indeterminate, cannot be determined, and you will never get that information. You will never be told that, okay? And any problem that you might get, you will just find out that this good's becoming more popular, and at the same time, the government cut taxes on producers. What's going to happen to price? Don't know. Quantity is going to increase, okay? That's moving in the same direction. Opposite directions, we know the opposite. If we want more and they give us less, what's going to happen to price? Going to go up, okay? So, yeah. So if we're moving in opposite directions, if we want more, but they give us less, then price is going to go up. But what happens to quantity? Well, that time I drew it so it's fairly even. But I could have easily drawn it so that this time supply shifts in a lot, okay? But demand only shifts out a little bit. When that happened, what happens to equilibrium quantity? That decreased, okay? So it depends on which curve shifts more. When both curves are shifting in opposite directions, we should be able to figure out what's going to happen to price. We want less, they give us more. Surplus, price will fall, okay? We want more, but they give us less. Shortage, price will rise, all right? But what happens to quantity? Don't know, unless you know which curve shifts more, okay? When both curves are shifting at the same time, we can figure out what's going to happen to quantity or to price, but not both at the same time, okay? One or the other. And if you have trouble remembering, start with the point where both of them are shifting out. They're both increasing. We've got to be moving in this direction, so I know quantity, which means I don't know price. All right? Okay. All right. What's next on the agenda? The rationing function of prices. Okay. I mentioned this early on, that there's a number of questions that every economic system has to answer. Okay, and these are the ones, basic ones. Depends on what book you read, what economic questions they think they have to answer. But in general, what they have to answer is, how much are we going to produce? What are we going to produce, and how much of it? Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing they have to answer is, who's going to produce it using what resources? In a free market capitalist system, Individuals own all resources. They decide what's going to produce, okay, and how much. And then finally, the last question is, on what basis will we distribute these goods and services to the members of the society, to the people who live here? How will we decide who gets what, okay? How do we decide in this economy, in this country, who gets what? How many of you own a Porsche? Nobody? No, why not? Yeah, you can't afford it. Can't afford it. The price is too high, okay, compared to your income. How about Bill Gates? Do you think he has a Porsche? Hell yeah. Huh? Oh, he does? Yeah, I'm sure he's got everything that could possibly desire to have, pretty much, right? You know what they used to say to about, this was a long time ago, but you know what they used to say about him when he only had about 30 billion bucks and still can't get a date. Because he's a pretty homely guy. Anyway, it's amazing how handsome money will make you. Won't it? Well. All right, so Gates gets way more stuff than I do, right? Why? He has more income, okay? He has more income. If there were more people, what would happen if there were more people willing to buy this good at the current price than the amount available? Okay? What would happen? Price would rise, right? When we have a shortage situation, okay, and the price is down here, that's the quantity they'll give us, but that's the quantity that we want, all right? There's too many people. They're only offering 10, there's 20 of us showing up. How are we going to decide who gets what? We're going to raise the price. And when the price rises up to here, they'll increase the quantity to 15, but 5 of us will drop out of the market. We will no longer buy this good, okay? Only 15 of us will be willing to buy. This good has now been rationed so that the amount that gets produced is distributed to the amount of people who are willing to take it at that price, okay? So we have a price system that rations goods and services to those willing and able to pay the price. If you have the money and are willing to spend it, you get the goods. But if you don't have the money or you're unwilling to spend it, you don't get the goods, okay? And if there are more people at the current price who are willing to spend the money on that good than the amount available, the price will rise until enough people drop out of that market and enough additional units are produced so that there's just the right amount. The amount of people willing to buy is equal to the amount they're offering to sell, okay? So prices act as a rationing device, distributing goods and services to those willing and able to pay the highest price, the equilibrium price, okay? Is that the only way to decide who gets what? How do they decide in Cuba who gets what, or North Korea? Remember, they don't have a price system there. The government artificially keeps prices very low, okay, so that anybody who wants one can afford to buy one, okay? Right? What happens in societies where you don't ration by, or economies, where you don't ration by price? You end up with either under-allocations or over-allocations of resource. Not enough to go around, or in some cases too much, okay? You end up with surpluses or shortages. Now, there are other ways to ration goods and services, like I said. How about in Cuba? First come, first serve. If you're at the head of the line, you get. If you're at the back of the line, you don't get, okay? So what does this do? This causes people to waste tremendous amounts of time standing in line for things that they may or may not really desire to have. I talked about that, right? That the people in the old Soviet Union used to spend maybe half their day standing in lines when they should be working. They're out there standing in lines hoping to get something, right? Okay. So if you're at the front of the line, you get. At the back, you don't get. Now, if you're at the front of the line and you get, and you decide this isn't really what I wanted, but I got it because I can, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the guy at the back of the line and say, hey, you wanted this, right? Why don't you meet me around the corner, right? Or I will sell this to you at a much higher price than what I just had to pay for it, okay? Eventually, price does come into the picture. Maybe not initially, but through the black market, okay, that equilibrium price will be achieved. Right? How else could we distribute goods and services if we didn't use price system or standing in line? Well, I could decide, well, let's say I showed up here with 10 books the first day, right? How could I decide who's going to get those 10 books? First come, first serve, that's a possibility. I could auction them off, yeah, that's another possibility, but that's a price system, right? When you auction them off, you're saying who's willing to pay the highest price. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I could do it randomly. Everybody put your name in a hat and I'll pick out 10 and you 10 get them. Or I could say women first, and then if there's any left over, you guys can have them. You belong to the right group, you get. You belong to the wrong group, you don't get. Okay? Remember I told you that business in the Soviet Union. They had special stores for people who belonged to the Communist Party where you didn't have to wait in line. Okay? You belong to the right group, you get. You belong to the Communist Party, you get. You don't belong to the Communist Party, you don't get. You belong to the right religion, the right tribe, the right ethnic group, maybe you get. Okay? Or how do you think they distribute goods and services in Somalia? Okay. On what basis do you get the goods and what basis do you don't get the goods? Yeah, piracy, that's in the right area. You got the guns, you get the goods. You don't got the guns, you got nothing. Okay, that's how it works there, by power, who has power. Okay? There are lots of different ways we could ration goods and services, but the price system is the most efficient. Okay? Is it the fairest system? Bill Gates gets way more stuff than I do. Is that fair? Hell yes. You get what you earn, right? Okay? Not, I mean, you could, if it was standing in line, you get it by just being there at the right place at the right time. Okay? This is the fairest system, but some people may say it's not fair because some people get more than others, right? But that depends, well, mostly on you, some luck, of course, right? Not entirely dependent upon you, but some luck. But this is the most efficient system we've been able to come up with so far, okay? But it's not perfect. All right? Now, sometimes, I didn't talk about this. I meant to talk about this earlier. But there are two ways to approach economics or economic decision-making. We're going to stay in the world of what's called positive economics. What that means is we're going to try to avoid value judgments. Okay? We're going to try to avoid what's called normative economics, from the word norm, standard of behavior. Okay? Standard. When we have normative economics, we make economic decisions based on what we think should be, ought to be, would like to be. Okay? Not the way things are, but the way we would like them to be. We want to try to stay in the world of positive economics. Just the facts, ma'am. Okay? If A changes, what will be the result? Not what do we want to be the result. Okay? When we get into normative economics and use value judgments to determine our economic decisions, the government usually acts on our wishes, right? We make our wishes known. We want things to be there. Nobody should have to work for less than this amount of money per hour, okay? You can always tell normative economics because it has a value judgment. You hear a word should or ought to or ought not to or too much or too little, okay? All right? So when we get into the area of normative economics and we make our wishes known to the government who makes the laws, they will usually interfere in the economic system, and it's almost always a bad idea. Okay? It doesn't work out well, usually. Okay? Now, we get interference in the price system by the government because the government believes that the price of this good should be higher than it is or would be, or should be lower, okay? When they decide, I live in a rural community way out in, near Fitchburg, okay? And the town likes to keep the people that run the town want to keep the town rural. So we have dairy farms, and they don't want the dairy farms to be sold off to condominium builders, right? So they artificially keep their prices higher to make sure that they make a profit and can stay in business and will not sell the farm to the developers, okay? So they have price ceilings, price floors to keep the price of milk, butter, cheese from coming down so that the farmer is guaranteed to make a profit and stay in business, okay? So when we get government interference, say, in that type of market, the government will say, listen, we want to make sure that farmers make enough money to make a profit. So we're going to say that the minimum price you can pay for cheese is $4 a pound, okay? Now, let's say market equilibrium price would be at $3 a pound. If they said you can't pay any less than $2 a pound for cheese, would that matter in this market? No, because we're already paying $3. So this is called a price floor, okay? It's a floor. It keeps the price from going down. And price floors, to be effective, have to be set above equilibrium, okay? It keeps the price from coming down to where it should be, here. If you put a price floor down here, who cares, okay? We're already at $3. If I said the least you can pay for a course here at Bunker Hill is $10, what chance do you have of getting a course here for $10? Zero. Okay? So the price floor, to be effective, has to be set above equilibrium price, and what it does is keep the price from coming down. It guarantees that the farmer can make a profit on every gallon or every pound of cheese that they sell, okay? But what happens when we have a price floor? Here's the quantity that we're willing to buy, okay? But this is the quantity, thanks to that high price, that farmers are willing to produce, okay? Yes, it causes a surplus. What good does it do the farmer to produce 50 tons of cheese when they can only sell 20 at the $4 price? They're going to be left over with 30 tons of 30 pounds of cheese, right? What good does it do? It doesn't do them much good. In order to be profitable for the farmer, they need to sell all of their cheese, okay? So the government says, well, the cheapest people can buy it for is $4, and that ends up with 30 pounds or whatever of surplus cheese. What's going to happen? The government will buy that cheese, okay? Whose money are they going to use? Ours, taxpayer money, right? Okay? And what are they going to do with that cheese? Make some fondue? Oh, not sell it. They give it away, okay? The next time a hurricane hits the Yucatan Peninsula, we'll ship a bunch of cheese down to the Yucatan, okay? All right? So we get price floors in the agricultural industry. Any place else we get a price floor? I know the book mentioned it or talked about it.
I got a question.
Yes.
It's funny that when I read it, I thought about cigarettes, because when you go to buy cigarettes, it says minimum price allowed by law.
Oh, really? Ah, no kidding. Ah. Mm.
So I don't smoke, but I just wonder what they do with the extra cigarettes that companies are producing.
Huh, that's a very good question. That's a very interesting question. Huh. I didn't know there was a minimum price by law that you could pay for cigarettes. Do you know why that is? Well, yeah, they tax the hell out of cigarettes, right? Like 50% of what you pay for a package of cigarettes is tax. What's the government doing? It's trying to reduce the quantity demanded by keeping the price artificially high, okay? But you would think that would cause a surplus of cigarette production, right? I don't think it does, though. Right?
So people, even though it's expensive, people will pay for it.
Yeah, people will pay for it anyway. We didn't talk about this, but demand can be really elastic, meaning very sensitive to prices, okay? Meaning you get a downward curve like that if the price is here, we take that many, and if it goes way up to here, we'll take a lot less. Or it can be like in the case of gasoline. inelastic, almost straight up and down. That if the price is here, we'll buy that amount, but if the price goes way up here, we're not going to buy too much less. Okay? Why is that? We have to have gasoline, right? So, but we don't have to. Cigarettes tend to be like this, right? Because smokers are addicts, right? At any price, got to have it, right? How much is a pack of cigarettes now? $7. How much? 9? So let's say you smoke what's 6.5 packs a week. That's $50 a week, $2,500, $2,600 a year on cigarettes. Wow. Let's see.
From state to state. So
Oh, it does.
I pay 9, but when I go back home to California, I pay under $5.
Under 5. Wow. They encourage you to smoke in California, do they? Hey, it's one way of reducing the population. Don't have to pay so much Social Security. Well, let's see then. I've saved about $12,000 since I quit smoking. Nice. Yeah, I quit smoking almost 6 years ago. So, yeah, I saved a lot of money, haven't I? Plus, I'm no longer in danger from my wife. I smoked for 25 years without her knowing it. Yeah. Imagine that. I am so sneaky. Oops, that's recorded. Okay. All right. So where else do we get a price floor? Well, I think it's around $8 an hour. Labor market. Okay? Nobody should have to work for less than this. Anybody who works ought to be able to make enough money to live. Okay? All right? So the equilibrium wage might be down here, say it's $6 an hour, but the government says the least you can pay somebody to work for an hour is $8 an hour. Okay? What does this theoretically cause? Unemployment. Precisely right, right? At that high wage, that's the quantity of labor we're demanding, and that's how many people are looking for a job, okay? So we end up with a surplus of labor. Let's say price was here. We were in equilibrium. But now the government says, let's raise minimum wage to $8. What's going to happen? This was the quantity demanded of labor. That's now the quantity demanded. You're going to get laid off, maybe, okay? If you get to keep your job, you are happy because you are making more money. But some people might get laid off. As the price of labor rises, the quantity demanded of labor falls, okay? And unemployment increases. Who's unemployed? Corporate vice presidents? No. Who's unemployed here? Unskilled, uneducated labor. And who are these people? Who do they tend to be? Yeah, sure. Teenagers and immigrants, for the most part. In particular, who suffers the most are inner city black teenagers, black men, okay? The unemployment rate is way higher amongst them than almost any other class, all right? Okay? Because that's who tends to be less skilled and less educated. And, of course, there's probably a fair amount of racism involved in that, right? Okay? Who am I going to lay off? Not only that, but when minimum wage rises, your chance of finding a job if you are unemployed go down, right? I mean, McDonald's might have a $50 an hour wage rate, right? So they can hire at $5, they can hire 10 people. But if it goes up to 60, they got to get rid of 2 people. Now it's only down, $6 an hour, then it goes down to 8. 2 people are going to lose their jobs, okay? Now, this may and may not be 100% correct, okay? Remember what happens to the demand curve if our incomes rise? Okay, remember? Yeah, it's going to shift out, right? And we're going to buy more stuff. And manufacturers are going to sell more, and if they sell more, they're going to need more people. So maybe it's not so bad as the book paints it, all right? That minimum wage, yeah, sure, it does cause unemployment, but maybe adjustments will be made So that employment rises again thanks to the stimulating effect on the economy that now these people can buy more stuff. Okay? Maybe, maybe not. All right? But general theory is that minimum wage, like all price floors, causes a surplus. And when we talk about minimum wage labor, it causes a surplus of workers for minimum wage. It causes unemployment. Okay? Do we get price ceilings? I haven't seen any in this area, but supposedly rent controls still exist in places in New York and apparently in California. Okay? When you get a price ceiling, okay, prices aren't allowed to rise to equilibrium. All right? Now keep this straight, okay? Unlike the real world, floors are above and ceilings are below. Okay? The floor keeps the price from dropping down, and the ceiling keeps it from rising up. Okay? So don't forget, floors are above, they keep prices coming down. Ceilings are below, they keep prices from rising. Okay? And ceilings, they cause shortages. That's the quantity supplied, and that's the quantity demanded. The only place that I can think of, and I think the only place the book mentions that you get price ceilings is in the rental market, right? Anybody should be able to afford to live in Cambridge, okay? So we're going to keep the prices of apartments artificially low, okay? Right, and what happens? I mean, if the price was here at equilibrium, we'd get 1,000 apartments. But instead, because they're not making that much money, we only get 800. And instead of 1,000 people now wanting to live here, we get 1,200 people because the price is so low. 400 people now can't find an apartment. Okay? What good does it do you to keep the rent low if you can't find a place to live? Manufacturers of apartments, what are they going to do? They can't make any money, right? If I owned an apartment building, say up here in Boston, and I couldn't make any money on it, what would I do? Sell it? Who's going to buy it? You know what I would do? I'd call my friend Vito up in the North End. I'd say, Vito, I got something for you to do on Friday night. Get your gas can and meet me down. Okay? I'm going to burn the place down so that I can build an office building instead. Right? What this also causes are, again, black markets. As the book mentioned, there are all kinds of celebrities living in New York City who are paying below market rates for these luxurious apartments. It also happens you get a lot of subletting, right? I have this apartment. I don't even want to live here anymore. I'm going to move out to Malden, right? I don't want to live here in Boston, but man, this apartment I can still maintain. I only have to pay $500 a month, but I can let it to somebody else for $1,000 a month. I can get them $500 a month. And what happened to rent control? It's out the window, right? That profit is now moved from the owner of the building to me, okay? I can't afford to maintain your apartments anymore, right? So if something goes wrong, is it going to get fixed? Probably not. No time soon, okay? Not only that, but the only way I can raise your rent or raise the rent is if I get a new tenant in, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to do everything I can to get you to move out, right? You're 5 minutes late with a rent. You're out. Okay? I heard music last night after 10 o'clock. You're out. Okay? So it causes all kinds of distortions. When we get normative economics, we make a value judgment. Nobody should have to pay more than this, or farmers should get at least this. We get these shoulds or oughts, right? Nobody should have to work for less than this. The government interferes in the free functioning of the price system, and we always end up with either shortages or surpluses. Okay? The rationing function of prices is not allowed to work. Okay? And we want it to work effectively. There's always a problem when the government interferes, almost always. As we're going to see, there are some cases where the government needs to interfere in the system. Okay? Because the price system fails to properly allocate resources. It ends up with too many goods or too few goods being produced. Okay? We'll talk about that right now, right? 10, 20. Is there anything else? Quantity restrictions, import quotas. That's another way, right? We do end up with some quantity restrictions, meaning that the supply of the good is artificially reduced in order to keep. Why do we have any idea why we have import quotas? A limit on the amount of a good that can be imported? To protect domestic producers from foreign competition, yes. Okay. It's become nearly impossible to do that now. Thanks to our membership in the World Trade Organization, we can no longer maintain import quotas in order to protect domestic businesses from foreign competition. We have to allow free competition, that the goods should be produced in that place where they can be produced most efficiently. And if that's not here, we'll buy it from there. We'll import it, okay? So we've eliminated most import barriers. There are reasons why we do protect, or prevent some imports. Primarily to protect people. We don't just allow any old drugs to come into the country, right? I mean pharmaceuticals, the other ones we let in. They're very good at getting those into the country, but the legitimate stuff, they can't get in, all right? To protect people, or sometimes for national security reasons, right? We want to make sure we still produce that good here, chips, right, computer chips. I mean, in times of national emergency or a war or something like that, we still need to be able to produce computers. So we have to be able to have a supply of that, supposedly, okay? There are a variety of reasons, but for the most part, we don't restrict imports anymore, and we don't even tax them anymore. Do you know what the average tax on an import into the United States is? 3.2%. Okay, that's it, practically no tax at all, and the vast majority of goods enter this country without any taxes on them at all, none whatsoever. So we don't get much of the way of quantity restrictions anymore. We used to, particularly in the area of textiles, cloth. We used to restrict the amount that foreign countries could ship into the United States. Well, we used to restrict the number of automatic assault weapons that could be imported. Now there's no limit. This is true, unfortunately, at any rate.